I'm Christine. Welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I'm here with a yes, no, maybe for fantasy romances I've read recently. Okay, so I have been wanting to do kind of a video like this for quite some time and just never got around to doing it. So I needed another video to film today because I'm bulk filming, and I decided this would be the perfect one to do. I wanted to get into this idea of like yes, no, maybe for certain books I've read. So like I'm doing fantasy romances today. So I thought it'd be fun to kind of do these for different tropes, genres, kind of have books go head to head, so to speak, especially for tropes. I think that would be really fun as well. So like second chance romances, small town, kind of things like that. I'll just do like a clump of ones I've read recently and then go yes, no, maybe and tell you which ones I think absolutely pick up, don't pick up, or ones that like maybe will work for you. So first up is fantasy romances, and these are just 15 that I read recently-ish, and like by recently I mean going back into spring, summer of last year. So a good, what, like 8 months worth of fantasy romances that I've read. So like I said, this is 15 of them. I just grabbed them from my Goodreads. I always have books like kind of broken up by tropes or by subgenre. So I just grabbed the recent ones I've read and we're gonna go through them, and I'm gonna quickly tell you if I think they're worth it. So that's gonna be a yes. If no, I would not pick them up, not recommend them, or maybe like dependent, and I'll probably get into details of like what it is dependent on. Some of these are gonna be brand new releases that just released in December 2024 and also January 2025. So really recent reads as well. As always, I'll link every book and author that I talk about below. So if you miss any or wanna go grab any of these, they're all linked below for you to check out. Also, like I mentioned, this video is gonna go pretty quickly, so I won't say too much about plots or the books overall because I wanna keep it kind of snappy and speedy. We'll see, because I love to talk a lot, but hopefully I'll keep it quick. And so if you wanna see more of my thoughts or full reviews on any of the books that I'm about to talk about, I of course always review every book that I read, and all of my book reviews are on Goodreads, which is linked in the description of the video. So let's get into it, and hopefully I can keep this quick. All right, these are in no particular order. So first off is North is the Night by Emily Rath. This one, absolutely yes, I did enjoy this one. It just came out in December of 2024. First of all, this edition with the sprayed edges and the gorgeous art, it's a stunner, like I have to show you. So we're already like kicking this off by me talking a lot, but look how pretty this edition is, and like the underside as well. It has a reversible dust jacket. Like, can you even? I'm obsessed, which I hadn't bought a copy of it until I read it because I wanted to see what I felt about it. I loved it so much. So like halfway through, I ended up purchasing this edition to make sure I got all the like sprayed edges and all the goodies that it has. And so yeah, I love this one. This one though, I will say, definitely don't go in expecting fantasy romance. It is definitely just fantasy, and it has some romantic elements in it, but even those are super slim. I know that the author was kind of saying this is more historical fiction, kind of like a mythology type vibe. She said it had a sapphic romance, but even that, like, I don't know, I wouldn't classify it as sapphic romance personally. So, I mean, you'll kind of see if you've read the story, but for fantasy, it's amazing. Like, I loved this one, so it's definitely a yes for me. I give it 4.5 stars, really enjoyed it. This one is a take on Finnish-inspired folklore and turned into a fantasy, and I really ate it up. I was just so immersed in the story. The audiobook is fantastic, so this one is definitely a yes for me. I loved seeing the characters' journeys, kind of seeing the kind of gods of death and all of these things and all of these tricks and things that came into play into the story. Really enjoyed it. Kind of this journey of these two friends. They get separated. One is on the search for her friend, and her friend is definitely going through it on her side. So yeah, really enjoyed this one. North is the Night is a yes from me. Then we have The Dawn of the Cursed Queen by Amber V. Nicole. This is a yes from me, but only if you've read the first 2 books in the series. This is book 3 in her Gods and Monsters series. I love the series to pieces. This one came out in May of 2024. Highly recommend the entire series if you want a true enemies to lovers setup. That is the case for that. This is also high fantasy as well, where we're getting this very intricate world and these gods and celestials and monsters, and just seeing how all of these kind of characters play into their world. Highly recommend. It's just so good and addictive. Morally gray characters, a badass morally gray villainous heroine. Love it to pieces. Each book ends on such a cliffhanger that you will be wanting to pick up the next books. So yes to book 3 if you've read the first 2 books, because it is a ongoing series where we're following the same couple, the same characters. Highly recommend. Next is A Spell Shop by Sarah Beth Durst. This one has a really cute, very cozy vibes. If you can't tell by the cover, we have the really pretty purple edges. This one, I would say maybe I did enjoy this one, but it's very like cozy fantasy, very like cottage core and just cutesy. I wouldn't even classify it as fantasy or fantasy romance. Very light, low angst, not a lot of world building, but I enjoyed the characters, so I enjoyed it. And I love sometimes, I should say, picking up a kind of low angst cozy fantasy. So if you are a fan of cozy fantasy, and I'm talking books like Travis Baldree, TJ Klune, like those type of style of cozy fantasies, then I recommend. So yeah, I enjoyed this one because I did love the characters. characters. So this one would be a maybe depending on who I am recommending it to, but I did enjoy it. Next is Fear the Flames by Olivia Rose Darling. This edition is gorgeous, but it's going to be a no from me. I did not enjoy this one. I had actually pre-ordered it back last year during Barnes & Noble's like pre-order sale. They always get me, and I have learned to since not pre-order all the things in the world, especially if I haven't tried them yet. So this one's going to be a no from me. I did not enjoy this one. I'm somebody who loves world building in fantasies and kind of give me more to the story, to the world, to the plot, to the depth of the characters. That's what I love in fantasy romances. So this one was a disappointment for me because the world building was lackluster. The plot, I feel like that was told in the blurb doesn't really come into play, or it's kind of overshadowed once it does happen. Like it was just kind of a blip on the page. The characters as well just felt immature to me. The dialogue immature. It just very much felt like this dialogue was written to hook TikTok readers, if you know what I mean, like some of that kind of dialogue for things they know will become a hook. So not for me. This one actually ended up having me go on a tangent of like, what's the difference between romantasy and fantasy romance? Because if this is romantasy, I don't want it. I want fantasy romance. So if there is a difference, I prefer more fantasy to my fantasy romances. That's a personal choice, but this is a no from me. I gave it 2 stars. Next up is The Wraith King by Juliet Cross. This one would be, I don't know, no from me. Maybe, but mostly no. I didn't enjoy this one. I had high hopes for it because I really love Juliet Cross's writing, and this one was kind of mid, very lackluster for me. I wanted a more world, which I know it's the first in a series, so like I'm sure it's going to be developed and explored later on, but I also wasn't pulled in enough to want to stick around or care. I had some issues with the characters as well, and I just wanted more from what it was. So maybe, but mostly no from me. Next is The Starlight Air by Omley Howard. So this one actually just came out in January. It came out on January 7th. And this one I had an ALC of it, so I read it early. And this one is going to be a maybe from me. I was entertained enough, but at the same time, I wasn't like super immersed or pulled in. It was one that I was listening to the audiobook of, and I felt like it was entertaining for what I was doing that day, like to just passively kind of be into the book. I wasn't obsessed or as excited as I have been for this author. Usually writes historical romances. I love her historicals. This one was kind of mid for me. I feel like it was interesting enough though, like if you want something that is a little different, because in here the author uses her own lived experiences, her own background and culture. So in this one we get a lot of Indian and Middle Eastern mythology and astrology and palmistry, and so I did really enjoy that aspect to the story. I just wasn't fully obsessed with the romance or the fantasy elements of it. I think it's the first of a new series as well. It was okay. I was entertained enough, but I wouldn't go in expecting like the next best thing, if that makes sense. So it would be a maybe from me. Next is Embers in the Snow by Anna Carvin. So this one I actually just finished. This one's going to be a yes from me. I really enjoyed this one. It had been on my TBR for kind of all of last year, and I finally decided to get to it because I saw that my library via Hoopla had the audiobook. This one was a lot of fun. It involves vampires as well, which will always get me to pick up a book. So in here, the heroine, she is a baron's daughter, and at the beginning of the story, her father ends up telling her that he betrothed her to somebody. Like he went to the emperor and he got a betrothal for his daughter, and she's going to be marrying the emperor's firstborn son, who is the former heir to the kingdom, where some things happened where he was a war hero or commander, and when he went up and fought some battles and ended up in like this mountainous area, some things happened and some things changed about him up there, and so now he is kind of living isolated, kind of broody away from the kingdom, and she is betrothed to him. And there's a lot of like speculation and rumors and gossip about he's changed and he's possibly drinking people's blood up there, and so it kind of goes from there. Really enjoyed this one. I will say the first half in particular really sold me. Kind of got a little bit laggy towards the end, so not like a perfect fantasy for me, but I really enjoyed it. I want to see if this author has more, because this was a new to me author, so this one is definitely a yes. Then we have Visions of Darkness by A.L. Jackson. This is a new release as well. This one just came out on January 7th. I had an audio ALC of this one as well, so I read it early. This one's going to be a no from me. I don't know. I'm kind of hit and miss with this author in general. She usually writes contemporary romances, and even her contemporary romances, like a series, some will work for me, some won't. So it might just be a me thing, but I just had issues with this one overall. Basically in here, I did enjoy that we're getting a kind of different take to fantasy. So basically in here, it's kind of like urban fantasy. It's like a real world setting, so to speak. And so in here, the dream world that the heroine literally goes to sleep and dreams about is a fantasy world. And so in there, she has this kind of like bodyguard, companion, guardian. And so she's always seen him as a friend and somebody she's really connected to. But when she wakes up and talks about him in the real world, her family and other people are like, what are you even talking about? Like, that's not a real place. So her family thinks that something is wrong with her and ends up putting her into a mental institution at the beginning of the story. But you see that things end up happening and come to be. And so maybe that dream world wasn't so much a dream overall. I had some issues with kind of like, it was interesting, but like, where else was it going? I wasn't intrigued enough to continue on, so I don't think I will. It was just fine. Like, I didn't feel like anything was exciting or grabbing my attention from the story or from the reveals. And here I was also having issues with the fact that in the real world version, we get first person POV, but in the dream world / fantasy world, we get third person POV of the characters. And I just felt like I have no problem with like first person POV stories, third person POV, but when they're in the same story, it always just kind of like messes with my mind. I don't know, I had issues with it, so it was fine. Like, it was mid, but probably a no from me. All right, and then next up is Quicksilver by Callie Hart. I read this one last year when it was an indie version still, so I have the gorgeous glossy, like shiny covered edition. This one's gonna be a yes from me. I love this one. It was totally worth the hype for me last year and just so good. Basically in here, this is kind of like a take on portal fantasy where we are with the heroine and she gets pulled in through this portal to the fantasy world. And so we are along with her on the ride of her figuring out what's happening, who these characters are. She has to make these weapons and some things that play into the plot. And I really enjoyed that style of fantasy romances. So I did enjoy this one. So this one is definitely a yes for me. It was so worth the hype. This one was picked up traditionally as well. I think it's also getting like a Netflix or an Amazon show, movie adaptation. So we will see what comes of that. But Quicksilver, Callie Hart, definitely a yes for me. Worth the hype. Next is The Veiled Kingdom by Holly Renee. This is a no from me. This was the first time I had tried out this author, and I just don't think her style is for me, which is totally fine. And again, all of these like yes, no, maybes, these are dependent on if you enjoy the same type of fantasy and the books that I enjoy. So it's very specific per person. But for me, it would be a no. I didn't know ahead of time that this author writes high steam, low plot. So that's not exactly what I want, which as you can tell from the books I've been talking about, that's not what I want in fantasy romances. I want high on the fantasy and obviously a romance in there too, but I definitely want more fantasy and world building and all of those things and things for me to like figure out as the story goes on. So I enjoy those type of books, and this one was just very straightforward. Here's all the information, here's all the steam. Wasn't for me, so I would say no personally. Next up is Reign of Shadows and Indians by Melissa K. Rorick. Not sure how to say that last name, so we're just gonna go with that. This one is gonna be a no for me personally. I did not enjoy this one. It felt very repetitive and like I just wanted to get the characters, the plot like moving and going. It was so laggy in the beginning and I just was not a fan. I had heard great things about this one, so I jumped in kind of blind to it and it just didn't work for me. I wanted more. I've heard the series gets better, but I don't think I'm going to continue on because I wasn't as invested to find out what happens, as well as I didn't enjoy the author's writing either. Just know that this one does deal with captivity, kind of like forced bonds situation. So a little bit of darker elements. So yeah, it was a no for me personally. Then we have The Courting of Bristol Keats by Mary E. Pearson. This one is a no from me. So I didn't know anything about this one. I had never read this author before, but I was sent an audio ALC of it and decided to give it a go. It came out last summer or fall, I want to say. It was a total miss for me. It was so long and repetitive and boring, and I just didn't care about the characters, didn't care about the plot. This one, I will say, it really reminded me a little too closely to The Cruel Prince and that whole series by Holly Black. So it's already been done, and like Holly Black did it better, so I didn't care about this one. I didn't care about the characters. The cover and the sprayed edges editions are gorgeous. I had actually pre-ordered this one before I read it, before I got the audio ALC, and ended up canceling my pre-order once I read it because it was just not it for me. So yeah, this one's gonna be a no. Next up is Phantasma by Kaylee Smith. So I actually just read this one recently, and this one is gonna be a yes from me. I really enjoyed this one. I was kind of wary about going into it because, as you can tell, I am a picky reader, which I don't think is a bad thing. I think we're all critical in our own ways. And so for fantasy, I know I am just more picky about specific things. So I was a little wary to read this one, but I decided to give it a go, and I really enjoyed this one. I ended up grabbing the audiobook during the recent Audible sale, which before in the past, I wasn't a fan of audiobooks for fantasy romances, but lately they've kind of worked for me. So I have been giving them a go. I enjoyed this one. I think it was really fun. I don't think it was totally worth all the like 5-star hype, but that's just me personally. I gave it 4 stars. I feel like I was entertained enough and it was a good time. This one in particular, we are following the heroine and her sister at the beginning of the story. Their mother ends up passing away, and their mother was a necromancer. This takes place in New Orleans, and the sisters find out that their home is going to be taken away from them. And so this home's been in their family for centuries, and so they decide, you know what, we need to figure out how we can keep it. At the same time, the main character's sister goes missing, and so she ends up following her, and it leads her to Phantasma, which is kind of like this game, trials, competition type situation and realm. I don't know what you would call it. Basically in here, there are different trials and levels circles, and the games kind of mimic the 9 circles of hell. And so when the heroine gets in here and she's from a family of necromancers, she ends up meeting a phantom who says that he can help her. He's trapped in Phantasma in the game. He has no memories of what happens before or after or in the middle of. He only remembers the game. And so he's going to help her get through some of the trials if she will help him figure out what's going on and possibly escape. And so it kind of goes from there. It's their partnership. I am not one who is a fan of kind of like those trials in fantasies. That kind of trope or thing doesn't really work for me as well. So that part I wasn't super invested in. I also actually wasn't really a fan of the romance either. Like it was just fine for me. I wasn't super pulled into it, and I feel like it's hard for it not to be kind of insta-lovey because insta-lusty, I guess, because of the entire situation with like the hero not remembering things in between kind of some of their meetings. So I feel like, I mean, that's the only way like that the relationship could work. It's going to be lusty kind of driven from there. And so I don't know, I wasn't a fan of some of that. But that's kind of being nitpicky because towards the end and some of the reveals and all of the things coming into play, I did enjoy. So I liked the reveals that they find out through the trials, and the ending I enjoyed. So overall, 4 stars, a yes for me. Then we have The House at Watch Hill by Karen Marie Moning. This one's going to be a no from me. I had an audio ALC of this one earlier in the fall, just came out last year, and it was a total miss for me. But I also think that this author just does not work for me. I actually ended up trying out a different book from her as well, one of her historical romances she's written, and I just don't think her and I, like her writing style just doesn't work for me. It doesn't jive with me. So I was just bored with this one, and I feel like the synopsis did not deliver on what it said it would, which again, another one where it's the first in a series, and so I'm sure maybe it will get there eventually, but like I don't care enough to stick around or come back to it. It was very long and just very boring. Like I didn't care about the characters. I read another book kind of similar to this whole like inheritance type plot, which was The Inheritance by Nora Roberts, which was amazing. So this one was just like super lackluster compared to that one, which I read after it. So yeah, I don't know. This one was a miss for me, but again, I don't think the author is for me, so just know that. All right, and then the last one is Heat of the Everflame by Penn Cole. This one is going to be a yes for me, but only if you have read the other 2 books in the series. This is another one where it's the 3rd book in a series. This is in her Kindred's Cursed Saga series, and you definitely need to read the series in order because we're following the same characters, the same couple throughout the series, and so it's a continuation of their story of this entire world. So you can't just jump into this one. You have to read the other books first. Book 2 is one of my favorites of the past year, which was A Glow of the Everflame. This is book 3. It just continues on and kind of builds on the world, the characters. It goes from there. I will say the 1st and the 3rd book were more just okay for me, but the 2nd book was just so good, and I'm so invested in what's going to happen in the world that I have stuck around. So yeah, 3rd book, yes, read it, but definitely read the first 2 books first. All right, so those are all 15 fantasy romances that I've read semi-recently, and if I think that they were worth it or not worth it, or maybe that you should pick them up. So let me know what you thought about this video. If you agree or disagree with any of my thoughts in the comments, definitely let me know. I'm somebody who knows that there is a book for everyone, and not every book is for everyone at the same time. So these are just my thoughts. Of course, some of these might be your favorites, and I'm so glad that they work for you. Hopefully you enjoyed this video. Like I said, if you have any fantasy romance recs for me, definitely let me know them in the comments, especially if you loved some of the ones that I have also loved. Maybe let me know some other ones that you think I would enjoy as well. And if you like this kind of idea, this kind of shorter video format where it's just kind of a quick way to give you my thoughts on a genre, a trope overall, definitely let me know, because like I said, I want to do some more of these going into the new year. So yeah, if you'd rather leave me an emoji in the comments, leave me a butterfly, because I have Quicksilver right here with me. So leave me a butterfly emoji. And if you haven't done so yet, make sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss out on any of my future videos, and I'll see you in my next one. Bye!